"Don't do this to me!" Gabriel's voice barely came out. His throat was dry, his eyes burning. His hands, which had been trembling, were now clenched into fists at his sides, his heavy suitcase seeming even more inert at his feet. The air in the apartment hallway felt thin, dense with suffocating expectation. "I crossed half a continent for you. I left everything behind." She looked at him for a second, the exact time between doubt and coldness, her once inviting blue eyes now like stones. A slight sigh escaped her lips, almost imperceptible, as if the conversation was already tiring her, and replied, "You shouldn't have come." The apartment door closed with a dry click, a final, absolute sound that echoed in the silence that followed. And with it, everything he believed about love, about destiny, about his own journey, crumbled into fine dust. But to understand that moment, we have to go back to the beginning. This content is a work of fiction inspired by real testimonies. We do not promote migration under unsafe conditions. Thousands have lost their lives on risky journeys. We advocate for legal, safe, and humane routes. This story seeks to generate empathy and reflection. Gabriel was always a simple man. He grew up in Governador Valadares, Minas Gerais, Brazil, where the heat seemed to melt the hours and life passed slowly. The son of an electrician and a teacher, he learned early on to work with his hands and to hide what he felt with his eyes. He was quiet, not for lack of thought, but for lack of listeners. The sound of his father's angle grinder, the strong smell of varnish in the workshop, the sun hitting the window of their small house. Everything was a routine he knew by heart, a familiar plot where he was a silent supporting character, a ghost in his own life. At 31, he lived alone in a small downtown apartment, the furniture sparse and the refrigerator always minimally stocked. He worked freelance, doing electrical installations and repairs. He earned enough to live, but not enough to dream. And that's what hurt. The feeling that life was always in limbo, waiting for something that never came. He saw himself trapped in a cycle of paying bills and surviving, while the world seemed to spin at a speed he couldn't match. The silence of the house at night was his greatest torment, amplifying the absence of something or someone to give meaning to his existence. The deep desire, almost a cry from his soul, was for a connection that went beyond polite words, a melody for his out-of-tune heart, until Mariana appeared. Not in the real world, but in an app notification, a bright icon that broke the monotony of his feed. She lived in the United States, spoke Portuguese with a heavy accent, and carried in her digital smile a lightness he hadn't seen in a long time. It was a smile that seemed to reach her eyes, a vibrant counterpoint to his own quietude. Her voice, even distorted by the internet, brought an unexpected freshness to his monotonous days. The first days were exchanges of messages, curiosity, then interest, then video calls, an improbable but true connection. He'd catch himself smiling in the middle of the day, listening to her audio messages describing her day, her fears, her small triumphs. She said she felt alone, that American friends were cold, that she missed someone real to share life with. "When you come, I'll pick you up at the airport and never let you go." Her words echoed in his mind like a sacred promise, a mantra that banished loneliness. He imagined her hug, her scent, the relief of finally having someone to fill the void. Each of her words was a link, an invisible thread pulling him away from his grey reality. Gradually, his protective walls came down. He told her about his mother's recent death, about the loneliness of days without purpose, about the fear of dying without having truly loved. He revealed the wounds he carried, the dreams that had turned to dust. She listened with an attention he had never received. She cried sometimes, her tears seeming to wash away some of his own pain. She said he was the most sincere man she had ever met, that his honesty was a balm amidst the superficiality of the world. With each conversation, his emotional dependence on her grew, weaving an invisible yet powerful web. He couldn't wait for his phone to buzz with a new message from her. Her presence, even virtual, was the fuel for his days, a breath of life into his slumbering existence. But there were internal contradictions that tore him apart. Why was she alone there, so beautiful, so vibrant? Was he a lifeline or a substitute for something missing in her life? He felt a terrible fear of being rejected, that all that virtual intensity wouldn't survive the touch of reality. His fingers squeezed his phone tightly, the screen warm against his palm. His breathing became shallow, short, as if air were scarce. He spent long minutes in silence, just watching his own reflection in the mirror, questioning every movement, every word he had said. He was anxious, he thought. But it was more than that. It was a silent dread that this new hope would be snatched away from him, a dark certainty that something could go wrong. And so, between nightly conversations and whispered promises, the idea was born. Come here. Mariana said she could help him find work, that there were openings, that she knew people, that if he was brave enough, they could start a new life together. Her words were an irresistible invitation, the melody he had longed for, the door to a future he dared to dream. The image of a new home with her was the only horizon that mattered. Gabriel hesitated. He thought of his father's house, which now seemed empty. He thought of the small workshop he had set up with effort, the tools hanging on the wall, dusty and unused. He thought of what he would leave behind, the warmth of Valadares, the smell of fresh coffee from his neighbor, the familiar accent. But he thought, most importantly, of what he could gain: true love, a new beginning, the chance to no longer feel life in limbo. Maybe what I'm looking for isn't here. The phrase became his mantra, his justification. The weight of the decision was immense, but the promise of real love seemed worth any sacrifice. The decision was a mini-climax in itself. He sold his car, an old goal that was both his work vehicle and his weekend companion. He got rid of tools, his old bicycle, everything that took up space without filling his heart. Each sale, each goodbye was a cut. He borrowed money from an uncle who looked at him with a mixture of concern and admiration, like someone watching a son go to war. He bought a sturdy backpack, new sneakers for the long journey, and saved a picture of her smiling on his phone, like a lucky charm. On his last night at home, he looked at the ceiling of his empty room and whispered, "This time, it's for me." But deep down, in the depths of his soul, he knew it was for her. The destiny he was drawing was her face. Have you ever held on to someone who only existed on the other side of a screen? Share your story in the comments. The crossing began with an unfamiliarity no guide explained, that of a body being torn from its own emotional geography. Gabriel left Brazil with a backpack, a number saved on paper, and an anxiety that couldn't fit in his chest, mixed with a feverish euphoria. His first stop was in Mexico, an explosion of colors, smells, and sounds that disoriented him. The second, a city lost between dust and tension, where Spanish was spoken at a speed he barely understood, and suspicious eyes followed him. It was his first time setting foot outside his country. He didn't speak Spanish fluently, could barely ask for water without stuttering. He knew no one, but he trusted that at the end of the journey, Mariana would be there. His love was a beacon, and those with faith walk in the dark. The hours dragged on in an old bus, the engine purring beneath his feet, Mexico's dry heat burning his skin. He looked at the arid landscape, the lone cactus on the horizon, and felt a knot in his stomach, a silent premonition of what was to come. Sweat trickled in salty, hot rivulets marking his skin. The following days were a parade of improvised transport, shared beds in precarious shelters, and strangers who knew more about escape than arrival. Crowded cars, dirt roads, bumps that made his head hit the ceiling, long waits in stuffy warehouses smelling of sweat, tobacco, and despair. There were codes he didn't understand, exchanged names. Discreet signals, averted glances that nonetheless held stories of pain. But he kept going, his mind focused on Mariana's image, her smile, the promise of a new life awaiting him. The rhythm of walking was a constant hammering, a torture for his feet. His phone, which he guarded like a treasure, was low on battery. Mariana's last message, 24 hours ago, was short. "Everything's fine here. Let me know when you have a signal." He read it over and over, searching for any hint of affection, but found only formality. A cold stab of doubt pierced his chest, chilling him. The fear of being forgotten, or worse, of being deceived, tightened the knot in his throat. In the desert, time ceased to exist. The sun cut his skin like a razor, drawing new lines of exhaustion on his face. Sand clung to his sweat, forming a second skin, chafing with every movement. Water was rationed in bottle caps, and each drop was a momentary relief for his dry, raw throat. Sleeping was a risk, a luxury that could cost his life. Stopping was a sin. The grinding of his own teeth from thirst, the uncontrollable trembling of his hands, the smell of hot sand and bitter sweat mingled in the dense, unbreathable air. There was a man with him, Wilmer from Honduras, with sad eyes and heavy steps. They shared silence, a nearly empty water bottle, the same palpable fear, the same urgency to cross. The loneliness of the journey was shared in minimal gestures, a compassionate look, a nod of understanding. One morning, Gabriel woke to Wilmer vomiting blood. The sound of vomit, the metallic smell, panic. They didn't know what to do. The guide simply said with a cutting coldness that made him shiver, "If he can't go on, we leave him." The phrase echoed in the desert silence like a death sentence. Gabriel, feeling an impulse beyond reason, an unknown strength, carried Wilmer on his shoulders for 2 hours, his friend's body heavy, limp, reeking of fever. Every step was agony, the muscle pain unbearable. His back burned, his shoulders ached, but he didn't stop. His determination was a silent scream against abandonment. Until a second group appeared, with one of the more humane guides, and picked up Wilmer. As they parted, Wilmer looked at him with gratitude in his eyes and said, his voice weak, a whisper in the wind, "Thank you. May she be worth all of this." Gabriel didn't answer, but for the first time, a cold shadow of doubt settled in his soul. Is she worth all of this? The weight of the question was almost as great as the weight of Wilmer's body. Hours later, walking alone on a narrow trail, the guide ahead pointed to a crack in the rock. "Wait here. Another car will come for you soon." He sat down, his heart pounding, his breath ragged. Minutes passed, then hours. The sun set. No one came. Darkness swallowed the landscape. The wind howled, bringing with it silence and darkness, a cloak of helplessness. He was alone, abandoned, and a primal panic overcame him. That night he dreamed of Mariana. She hugged him, her wide smile, the scent of jasmine from his childhood. But when he woke, the smell of mold and dust filled his nostrils. He realized he no longer remembered her voice. The image, once so vivid, seemed to fade, like an old bleached photograph. Wilmer's promise, "May she be worth all of this," returned like a hammer, echoing in his exhausted mind. The contrast between the dream and reality was a cruel blow. Have you ever pressed on with just a promise? Leave your heart if this story resonates with you. In the last few miles, Gabriel almost collapsed. His feet were bleeding, blisters bursting, raw flesh exposed. His back burned with the weight of his backpack and the relentless sun. His mouth, parched, stuck together when he tried to speak, a desert in itself. Every step was a battle against his own body, a silent cry for rest, for an end. The contrast was brutal, the mental image of Mariana in a bright, comfortable apartment while he crawled under the indifferent desert stars, a tiny speck of suffering. He crossed, literally. And when he stepped onto the other side, he felt no victory. He felt emptiness, an exhaustion that seeped into his bones, a dull ache that settled into every fiber of his being. His phone had no signal. Her last message had been 3 days ago. "Let me know when you arrive." A formality that now seemed like an abyss, her voice distant, hollow. He managed to contact a Brazilian who took him to a small apartment where other newcomers slept on the floor. The smell of mold, the shared mattress, the dim light, everything seemed temporary, a purgatory before the promised paradise. Less the longing, less the fear. He called her, rang, nothing. He sent a message. I arrived. Silence. The wait was torturous, every minute a century. The next day, a dry reply, "Okay, I'm busy." The pain he felt at that moment was different. It wasn't despair, it was disillusionment. A cold, sharp sensation, like an invisible blade. The physical crossing was over, but the emotional crossing, the hardest of all, was far from finished. 2 days later, she agreed to see him. The invitation came with a tone of someone doing a favor, not someone expecting a reunion. Gabriel took 2 buses, his legs still sore, his body heavy from deprivation and anxiety. He used the remaining money, the little he had saved for emergencies, his last reserve of hope. He carried a bag with a gift, a stone necklace he had bought in Brazil, a small, heavy reminder of home, with the dull gleam of an old, now fragile promise. At the apartment door, his hands trembled, a tremor that came from deep within, from the center of his being, a disjointed heartbeat. When Mariana opened the door, it wasn't as he imagined. She was beautiful, yes, her hair lighter, her body slimmer, her clothes elegant, in a style he didn't recognize, but cold. She was dressed as if she were going out, and she wasn't waiting for him. There was no sparkle in her eyes, no urgency for the hug he had dreamed of for so long. A quick kiss on the cheek without warmth, almost a formal greeting. "You actually came." The phrase sounded more surprised than joyful, almost a lament, as if his presence were an inconvenience. The scent of expensive perfume, which he didn't recognize, lingered in the air, strange and invasive. She invited him in, the gesture mechanical, without warmth. She offered him water, the cold crystal glass in his hands, but he didn't feel thirsty, just a lump in his throat. And as if pulling off a bandage, she said, "Gabriel, we need to talk." The following words were confusing, yet clear, like a direct hit. She was in a different place now. She had gotten involved with someone else. Her life had moved on, in a direction that didn't include him, on a path where he was no longer a part. She hadn't expected him to actually come. The revelation was a punch to the gut, a hollow sound that echoed in his ears, mixed with the traffic noise outside. He felt the heavy necklace in his bag, now a useless burden, the cold stone against his fingers. He tried to understand. His mind raced, searching for a justification, an explanation that made sense. He tried to say he could start over from scratch, that he didn't need to live with her or ask for help. He just wanted to see her, to be near, to start slowly, anything to hold onto that thread connecting him to her, to keep her from leaving. But she replied with a firm voice, devoid of emotion, a final tone, "You shouldn't have come. I can't help you." Her indifference was more painful than any anger, an invisible blade piercing his soul. He sat there, on the soft couch that seemed to swallow him, with the necklace still in his bag, weighing like a stone in the depths of his being. And a pain that didn't cry, it suffocated. It was an overwhelming emotional dissonance. His mind refused to accept her coldness, while his heart felt every stab of rejection, every fragment of his hope shattering. The loss wasn't just of Mariana, but of the identity he had built around her, of the man who traveled for love. Who was he now, without her? Without that purpose, a stranger in a strange land. Internal flashbacks flooded his mind, contrasting images colliding at dizzying speed. His grandmother waving goodbye at the door of his house, his uncle's worried look lending him money, the smell of coffee from Valadares, his old guitar, his friends at the farewell, and in contrast, images of Mariana smiling at her phone screen, the messages of love, the promises now dissolving like smoke, replaced by her face and another man's. The smell of his home, replaced by her perfume, so strange. Maybe I loved the idea more than the person, but what if she just didn't love me anymore? The inner monologue was a silent lament, an echo of his pain, mixing with the sound of car horns. Her voice, once a balm, now a razor. The city outside buzzed, indifferent to his suffering. The vibrant Madrid he dreamed of had become a cruel backdrop. He felt emptied, as if his entire essence had been drained, an empty shell. The rejection wasn't just hers, but of the very illusion that had propelled him. On his way out, the door closed slowly. No anger, no farewell, just an end. The dry click of the lock seemed to seal his fate, a final period on his great expectation. But as he walked down Madrid's cold street, his body trembling more from shock than cold, a tiny yet real emotional shift began to emerge. The pain was immense, but deep down, a voice whispered, he needed to keep going, for himself. That sacrifice, that journey couldn't be in vain, not after all this. The journey had been for her, but from now on, it would be for him, for his own dignity. Have you ever loved someone who wasn't waiting for you? Share your story. Maybe someone needs to read it. In the following days, Gabriel wandered. He took on small, exhausting, poorly paid jobs that barely covered his basic needs. He washed cars, his hands rough and dirty, feeling the pain in every movement. He handed out flyers in the fine autumn rain, his body chilled, his soul even more so. With each flyer delivered, he felt a piece of himself getting lost. He went hungry, his stomach growling amidst the noise of the relentless city, the smell of food from restaurants a torture. He thought about going back, but back to what? It wasn't just about her, it was about everything he had left behind. His father's sacrifice, his friends' hopes, his promise to himself. Going back would mean admitting total defeat, the uselessness of every step taken, every drop of sweat shed. He couldn't. He wrote to his father, "I'm fine, I just need some time." A pious lie, but a necessary one, to soothe himself and those who loved him. But he wasn't fine. He had been rejected, not just by her, but by the illusion he had created, by the hope he had cultivated like caring for a flower that never bloomed. His thin face, hollow eyes, and hoarse voice from so much silence were the portrait of his suffering. Gabriel rented a room in the basement of an old, moldy house. No windows, no furniture, just a bed, an old radio, and an electric kettle. It was a tiny space. The smell of dampness was constant, but he got used to it. It was his refuge, the only place where he could truly be himself. He started working as a construction helper, carrying cement, breaking walls, mixing mortar. He didn't earn much. His hands were calloused, his muscles sore, every movement a reminder of life's harshness. But it was enough to eat and send some money to his father, a small amount that connected him to his old life, a way of saying he was still there, fighting. Every night he wrote in a worn notebook he'd found in the trash. The sentences were short. almost a confession. Today I was invisible again, but I survived. Today I spoke English for the first time. Wrong, but I spoke. Today I felt less pain, but I still don't feel peace. Without realizing it, he was building something else, himself. Those words were bricks of a new foundation, of a new identity, of a new purpose. It was his story being rewritten. Emotional recovery came silently, in small acts of kindness to himself. He started cooking simple dishes, but with the strong seasoning of his homeland. The smell of garlic and cumin filled the room, bringing a comfort that loneliness couldn't extinguish. He began taking care of his body, going for long walks after work, observing the city without haste, without the burden of expectation. He learned new words in Spanish, absorbing the sounds, the phrases, and with each new word, he felt a little more belonging. And amidst the exhausting routine, he befriended a man from Guatemala, Miguel, who taught him to laugh again, a genuine laugh he hadn't felt in a long time. Miguel, with his calm demeanor and stories of overcoming adversity, became a brother. One day, walking through the city, he saw a couple embracing on a park bench, laughing loudly. For a second, Mariana's image invaded him, a flash of pain, a bittersweet memory. But soon after, he thought of himself, of the journey, the losses, the silent gains, the strength he discovered within himself, and he smiled, a true smile, one that wasn't for anyone else, but for him, the smile of someone who had crossed not only a continent, but himself, finding a new home in his own resilience. If you've ever rebuilt your life from the ruins, this story is your mirror. Subscribe for more stories that transform pain into awareness. At the end of the year, on a cold, rainy night, he wrote the last sentence in his notebook, the pen scratching the paper, the sound echoing in the small room. I don't regret coming. I would regret not trying. I crossed for love, but the love that saved me was the one I learned to have for myself. Not all footprints leave a path, but some leave eternal lessons. And sometimes the person you went looking for wasn't in another country, but within you.